I've got fancy questions on the electrical rate of China, of cities and this and that. Forget about it. All we care about is in counting 29 days, there's an Olympics in Beijing. As you look at the Beijing Olympics, what's the key thing you are watching for politically for the Chinese elite?
Well, it always comes down to whether Xi is embarrassed or not. And no one wants to embarrass Xi because it's bad for their health. So they are going to be putting in restrictions that don't, on a level no one's ever seen before. They don't want any bad news. They're expecting some outbreaks, but I guess that means grabbing someone and throwing them in a room and for the next 14 days afterwards. They don't want bad news. The news coming out of the Olympics has to be the Chinese Communist Party ran a tight ship and there were no disasters. And so that's what they're expecting, and that's what they better see.
What is the backdrop of the Beijing economy, and for that matter, the larger Beijing economy, as we have these Olympics? Is it thumb up or thumb down on the animal spirit of the region?
Well, it's interesting you term your question that way because, the Beijing economy is looking a little bit different than the Chinese economy writ large right now. Usually you see when we look at this from a regional perspective, you see the coasts having one type of performance and the peripheries having another type of performance. It's very rare that we see coastal provinces diverge dramatically, but that's what we're seeing right now. The closer you are to Beijing, the closer you are to Xi Jinping, the worse the performance is, the more the COVID crackdowns are, and it's really, really tight. Guangdong doing much better, Beijing not doing well at all. So I think this is in preparation for the fact that everybody's so nervous about the Olympics.
Well, and when you talk about the COVID zero policy, how does China ever realistically open its borders if they maintain it? And what's going to press its hand to finally give up?
Well, look, I think either, COVID gets brought under control on a global, basis, and the pill works, some vaccine just cures COVID for the most part or turns into a seasonal flu, or, the government gets past the Olympics, gets past the party Congress at the end of the year when Xi will get, recoronated for yet another term or life term. And then they have less to worry about. So maybe they open up a bit because they value the economic issues more than they do the COVID policy, the zero COVID policy. So a lot of things can happen, but it's going to be very difficult to change course in the coming months, considering how important the end of the year is.
One of the reasons why I always love speaking with you, Leland, is you have the on-the-ground facts about the different economic policies that we hear from Chinese officials. We've heard that they are talking about easing policy. We've heard that they want to expand lending a little bit to support the development, the housing development sector as we see all of the turmoil there. You're saying it's not actually happening. Can you give us a sense of what is happening in terms of tightness of their policy?
Yeah, everyone's getting ahead of themselves because, 2021 was an extremely tight year. 2022 is a politically sensitive year. You have the Olympics, you have particularly the Party Congress. So everyone sort of knows that policy isn't going to get eased one way or another, maybe mildly or not, and they're getting ahead of themselves. They want to be the first one to announce, whether it's a media publication or a sell-side pamphlet on Wall Street saying, look, easing's happening, look at easing. It's not happening yet. Now, do we expect it? Sure. They're going to have to boost sentiment sometime in 2022 if they don't like the data. Things are going to have to get better. But right now, we're looking at borrowing numbers, which are similar to the lows of 2021. We're seeing pent-up demand numbers, which are similar to the lows of 2021, which are the lowest levels we've ever seen in the history of the China Beige Book Survey. So the idea, property too, we saw a little bit of easing in November and they reversed it in December. So this idea that people can say, look, there's easing going on because we expect easing, it's not happening yet.
Leland Miller, I want to go back to your work at Oxford, where the wonderful Steve Tsang is truly expert in the culture, the fabric of Hong Kong. If you were to advise our listeners and viewers who are Western banks, what would you say to them about where Hong Kong will be in 5 years and how they need to adapt?
Well, all the problems with Hong Kong, basically that it's being taken over by mainland China and becoming just another Chinese colony, have been exacerbated by COVID with these quarantines. And so, you can't talk to someone who's unless you're Jamie Dimon, you can't talk to anyone who goes in and out of Hong Kong and isn't being driven crazy with these quarantine rules. It's not a way to do business. So the island has a historically important position. Geographically, it's important, but there's no way that Hong Kong is going to be this important in 5 years. It's declining every year. It's becoming too Chinese. It's becoming too closed. It's too hard to travel to. It's a sad story.